Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, May 22nd, 2024. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Sarah Jaffe, fellow at the Type Media Center based in New Orleans, on the failed attempt to unionize Vance, Alabama Mercedes plant and what's next in that fight. Also on the program today, in a largely symbolic at the moment, but unprecedented and significant move, Norway, Ireland, and Spain will recognize a Palestinian state. And what could be an all-out assault on the international rules-based order, Anthony Blinken says the Biden administration will work with Republicans to sanction the ICC at The Hague. Aid from U.S. peers not reaching the Palestinians as UN has to halt food distribution in Rafah because they've run out of supplies. Meanwhile, in this country, primary results from Kentucky, Oregon show AIPAC beating progressives and uncommitted winning delegates. New poll, 55% of Americans believe the economy is shrinking, despite the fact that it is not shrinking. This as Biden's appeal sinks to a 2-year low. Biden administration cancels $7.7 billion in student loans for 160,000 people. Trump opens the door to birth control restrictions and then sort of walks it back. The Louisiana House votes to make abortion pills a controlled substance, possession of which will land you in jail. Amazon workers in St. Pete, Missouri, file an unfair labor practice charge against Amazon with the National Labor Relations Board. And Kenyan Special Forces police arrive in Haiti. All this and much, much more on today's program. We are back. Welcome, folks. And Emma Vigeland off today. She's not here to... Is she Norwegian or Finnish? Finnish. Someone just IM saying that... Vigeland is a Norwegian name, by the way.
She may be both, but she's mostly Finnish, if I'm remembering correctly.
Solidarity from Norway said he's proud to, or she's proud, or they're proud to be a Norwegian today. Apparently, there's also a famous sculpture park in Oslo called the Vigeland Park. That is not where Emma is, to my knowledge. She's working out stuff with her landlord. Meanwhile, Matt is also out. Also, I don't know, probably gaming and working out something with his landlord. But Bradley is here, who obviously has a much better landlord than everybody else. And we got a lot to get to today. I'm going to go through some more Social Security stuff because some guy that I just happen to follow on Instagram, I don't have the video. It's a long story. Grandpa's just still learning. Just got off of MySpace, and so he's learning Instagram. but really just watch woodworking. But then they start feeding you stuff, and then you start going down these like wormholes. Also, and part of it was just because in the wake of the Social Security Trust Fund report, the amount of misinformation and lies, we see this every time, but I really want to crush it and stamp it out. Also, want to talk about a guy named Charles Littlejohn. You may recognize the name. He was the guy who leaked Donald Trump's taxes. Not just Donald Trump's taxes, though. And he's headed to jail, and an incredibly overly punitive sentencing on this guy. We will talk about that in a bit. But first, Donald Trump. And this is the thing with Trump, and I hope this is obvious. Donald Trump's going to say anything to get elected. And then once he is in power, he will also capitulate to those who he knows he has to maintain or a good relationship with to reinforce his power. I mean, once you're president, the way that you maintain your power is either at the idea that you may be president again, may run for another term. When you're, someone like Biden or Trump, whose age is somewhat advanced, that becomes less likely. The way that you maintain power within at least in the first couple of years of your term, is by doing things for the constituencies that you need to shore you up. Because if those constituencies leave you, the people around you, the people in Congress, they start going and saying, well, wait a second. This constituency is going to be around longer than Donald Trump, for example. So I'm going to go with that constituency because I'm going to have a future in politics that is going to exist after Trump is gone. That's the theory. And I'm just using it. Happens with Biden, it happens with all sorts of different politicians. And that's why it's important to understand that when Donald Trump backs off a statement like this, he's doing so because of the short-term reasons of getting elected. But ultimately, when he says it in the first place, he's willing to go there. Here is Donald Trump on with KDKA Pittsburgh's John Delano. This is a news anchor, John Delano. And here is Trump with an interview with him. This is on Tuesday.
It's a vote of the people.
So related to this is the whole issue of contraceptives. Do you support any restrictions on a person's right to contraception?
Well, we're looking at that, and I'm going to have a policy on that very shortly. And I think it's something that you'll find interesting. And it's another issue that's very interesting. But you will find it, I think, very smart. I think it's a smart decision. But we'll be releasing it very soon.
Well, that suggested that you may want to support some restrictions, like the morning after pill or something.
We are also, things really do have a lot to do with the states. And some states are going to have different policies than others. But I'm coming out within a week or so with a very comprehensive policy, which I'll get to you immediately.
Okay, good.
Now, look, Donald Trump has a history of, saying, well, Infrastructure Week is just a week around the corner, and we're going to get to it in a couple of weeks. And we have already heard his abortion policy. He made that announcement a couple of weeks ago. So I'm just months ago, maybe now. So I'm trying to, I don't want to say give him the benefit of the doubt, but I'm trying to come up with the most benign understanding of what he's talking about here. Maybe he just doesn't know what contraception is. But he's talking about the states, maybe misunderstood. I mean, what you say when contraception comes up, if you really think it's ridiculous, we would never even consider touching contraception. Like birth control pills? No, we're not going to do. No, that's That's silly, John. That's how you would answer that question if you didn't believe that it wasn't important for you to maintain a certain constituency and that you will give them that. Now, once he floats it out there, then it's out there, and no one knows more than the people who want to restrict birth control. Than even the huge anti-abortion activists. They understand right now that the policies they want are not shared by the majority of Americans, the vast majority of Americans. I mean, I don't know what the numbers are for people who don't want contraception restricted, but I imagine they're in the 60s or 70s in terms of percentages. But that remaining 25% or 30% of Americans, they're all in the Republican Party. And they're all part of that God squad that Donald Trump needs so badly to win, and he knows that. It's the same with abortion policies. But the full ban abortion people are winning. And so when Donald Trump does what he does next, those people understand he's got to do that to get elected. But we also know that he delivers when he's in office. And here he is on Truth Social. And let me tell you something. He would obviously do this in on TV if he really wanted to get it out. He would go on Fox and announce it. But instead, here he is on Truth Social. I have never and will never advocate imposing restrictions on birth control or other contraceptives. This is a Democrat fabricated lie. Misinformation/disinformation. Because they have nothing else to run on except failure, poverty, and death. I do not support a ban on birth control, and neither will the Republican Party. Now, you did hear him say, like, these are state policies. So the idea being, but if the states decide it, I don't know. If Donald Trump really wanted to do all caps, he would go on television and talk about it right now. But there you have. We'll have a little more to say about Donald Trump and Joe Biden a little bit later in the program. Also, just want to reemphasize this huge story about Spain, Norway, and Ireland recognizing a Palestinian state. They're not the first European countries to recognize a Palestinian state, but they are, I think, the first three Western European countries. 140 countries and the Holy See, as it were, have recognized the Palestinian state, but most of the Western European countries have not. So these are biggies, and it increases pressure and frankly isolates Israel more. And this coming at a time when the U.S. or the Biden administration at least is indicating, haven't done anything official yet, indicating that they will go along with the Republican plan to sanction the ICC. This is The Hague. Now, we don't know yet whether the ICC is actually going to issue arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Sinwar and the other Palestinian and Israeli officials. But this is The Hague. And the idea that the U.S. is actively attacking this one mechanism that the world has settled on in the wake of the Nuremberg trials to deal with crimes against humanity is pretty shocking. And the license it gives to a Republican president, someone who may be a lunatic, for instance, is huge, and it's a real problem. And hopefully, I think, maybe this also creates domestic pressure on politicians in Israel as the Israelis begin to realize we're becoming increasingly isolated. More and more countries are recognizing Palestine. The response to the October 7th attacks was obviously, even if in their minds they think it's morally justified, and even if in their minds they think it's somehow efficient, they can see strategically that it's been an abject failure. I want to make it clear, obviously, I don't think it's morally justified, and I also don't think it's efficient. But I would imagine they have more control of their domestic politics than I do. Though there are times where Israel certainly has an outsized influence on our politics. And that's from Thomas Friedman, ladies and gentlemen. I'll read from that today. I don't know if I couldn't get too much further past the headline. But Thomas Friedman's talking about how Bibi Netanyahu is leading Joe Biden around like a little lost child
rolling
in a zoo. In a moment, we're going to talk to Sarah Jaffe, fellow at the Type Media Center based in New Orleans, about what went down at that Mercedes plant in Alabama this week, or I should say at the end of last week. But first, a couple words from our sponsors. Just a reminder, we have something called the AM Quickie, folks. amquickie.com. You sign up, you get an email blast 3 times in your box a week for free. That gives you all the stories you need to know. And you get it in about 5 minutes. Great writing by Corey and Jacob. Check it out. amquickie.com. And then if you want it 5 days a week, sign up for the 5 days a week for a little bit of money to really ultimately defray the cost of the thing. Not a huge moneymaker for us, but a great service and something I pay for it. It's worth reading. I read it every day. Today's program sponsored by The Best Way to Learn a Language. Immersion. That's when living where the language is spoken and using it every day. However, we can't do that. Well, some of us can, but I can't. And if it's not in the cards this year for you too, you can still learn a language the second best way, and that is with Babbel. Over the years, I've dipped in and out of Babbel, thinking I'm going to go to somewhere where I can speak Spanish on a regular basis. And why? Porque me gusta hablar español. I've gotten pretty good. When I get back into it, I really get good because Babbel is honestly the best way to learn a language. Short of moving to a country and just, trying to survive. It is a science-backed language learning app that actually works. You don't have to pay hundreds of dollars for private tutors. You don't have to waste hours on apps that don't really help you speak the language. You can gamify things like some of these other apps, in my opinion, but you're not really learning the language. And Babbel really, really does teach you the language. They have 10-minute lessons, so they're quick, and they're handcrafted by over 200 language experts to help you start speaking a new language in as little as 3 weeks. Babbel's designed by real people for real conversations, helps you with your pronunciation and your accent. They have tips and they have tools that are really accessible. They are not intimidating. They are rooted in real life situations. And it is conversation-based teaching. So you're ready to practice what you've learned in the real world really quickly. They've done studies from Yale, Michigan State University, and others prove that Babbel is better. One study found that using Babbel for 15 hours is equivalent to a full semester of college. I've spoken to my daughter about that because it's also significantly cheaper. Babbel has over 16 million subscriptions sold, plus all of Babbel's 14 award-winning language courses are backed by their 20-day money-back guarantee. And here's a special limited-time deal for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription. 60%. That's 10% more than 50. 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/majority. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/majority, spelled BABBEL.com/majority. Rules and restrictions may apply. Also, new sponsor today. In the wake of COVID, I got very sensitive to the idea of like, hey, I want to clean my air, because I started to, at the time it was like, I'm going to put some air filters in here. I'm going to get rid of the COVID, et cetera, et cetera. And then you start reading about the other stuff that's in your air. Like VOCs. Do you know what those are? Volatile organic compounds. They come off of they can come off of your beds, like if you have certain types of foam beds, they can come off your furniture, certain foam in there, certain paints and varnishes and whatnot. And indoor air can be up to 5 times more polluted than outdoor air, mainly due to those VOCs. Well, you can get air filters and you can hear that thing humming all along, or you can actually make your apartment or your work look beautiful and attractive and clean your air with a plant. Check this out. NeoPX is the world's first bioengineered living air purifier designed to purify the air in your home. NeoPX was invented by PhD scientists to target 3 of the most harmful VOCs found in your home, and it is up to 30 times better than a regular houseplant at fighting indoor air pollution. That's where they tell you should have, there's certain plants that you can have, more or less, will clean your air. Well, the NeoPX does it up to 30 times better. It's based on 5 years of research and developed to enable NeoPX to capture and recycle VOCs into useful matter like sugar and amino acids. And then the science they have is in their power drops. Each month, you pour this bioengineered formula into the plant's soil, and it supercharges the NeoPX air pollution capacity. We have one right over there. I wanted to bring it over, but I was afraid I was going to drop it. NeoPX comes with a self-watering planter called the Shell, and this is super important for someone like me. You only have to water it every 2 or 3 weeks, because if I had to water this every day, it would die. It basically looks like what do they call it? Pothos? The ones that like grow and then hang, and you can cut it back or you can let it grow all the way down to the floor. I am increasingly adding houseplants to my house and now to our office, and I love clean air. Regular houseplants aren't enough to clean my air properly, and that's why this thing is, I became super excited when I heard about it. When you purchase a NeoPX, you'll receive 6 Power Drop sachets, or sachets. What do they call those? Packets. And to celebrate the launch, Neoplants is offering a 7th one free. That's 1 extra month of pure air. Just click the link below, neoplants.com/majority. We got it in the description, and the code will be applied automatically at checkout. That's neoplants.com/majority. shipping available within the U.S. and maybe soon to many other countries. Of course, this will be in the podcast and YouTube descriptions. All right, quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking to Sarah Jaffe, the Type Media Center based in New Orleans, about this vote the UAW took, or I should say the workers took, in an attempt to unionize their plant in Vance, Alabama on ended Friday. Near miss. Sarah Jaffe will tell us more. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Emma Vigeland is out today. Joining me now, Sarah Jaffe, fellow at the Type Media Center based in New Orleans, and just having written a piece for In These Times, in Tough Loss, the high-profile UAW campaign at Mercedes-Benz in Alabama falls short. Sarah, welcome back to the program.
Hi, yeah, thanks for having me again.
So just back up for us. I mean, we had talked about this quite a bit. It was a 4-day vote. We had been anticipating it, even prior to what took place at the Tennessee plant and the VW plant. But it was 2,045 votes to join the UAW, 2,600, a little bit more, 2,642 against. Yeah. There was about probably 300 or 400 people who didn't vote who were in that unit. If I remember correctly, it was around 5,000 workers. Give me a sense of if there was a sense prior to the vote, well, what happened, but also just where were we prior to the vote in terms of like what people thought might happen?
I mean, it's Alabama, right? You sort of have to start there always, that we are in the Deep South, and I'm, coming to you from New Orleans. You are in a place where not only the company is union busting, but the governor is union busting. Local elected officials are union busting. The coach of the Alabama football team is union busting, right? Like all of these luminaries are sort of coming together to say to these workers, you don't need a union. And that's like part of the carrot. Then the company brings in a new CEO who goes on a charm offensive and says, guys, if you trust me, I'm going to change things. We really care about you. And then they have the captive audience meetings, the firings, the endless barrage of text messages telling the workers to vote no. It's not that it wasn't a standard anti-union campaign in a lot of ways, right? Like, as I pointed out to a lot of people, even Walmart brought in a new CEO when far, far fewer workers had gone on strike. But it's Alabama, and you're not used to these things. And it ended up, it worked. It worked on enough workers that they changed their mind and voted against the union, despite, the workers going into the campaign thinking they would win.
Okay. And so, and just to let people know, the UAW obviously has been making this, is making this big push to unionize the South. And in the wake of the contracts that they won with the big three, right. They basically said, we're not going in and attempting to have a vote, because you're allowed to have a vote if 50% of the people sign, right? Is it 50%? Or
you can file with less than that. You can file an election with far fewer than that, right? Remember the Amazon labor union filed with 30% of workers having signed cards. So you don't have to have 50%. Most unions want to go into an election with something like 70% of workers having signed cards, because they know that the union busting will peel some people off. But what I think is really interesting about this particular campaign, right, is this was really worker driven. This was something that the workers at that plant have been organizing off and on for years with the help of the UAW, sometimes more than others. But this time around, they really looked at the big three. And as a couple of them said to me, before we were sort of promising pie in the sky, and this time you could look at the contracts that they won at Ford and GM and Chrysler, whatever it's called now, Stellantis, and say, this is what we could win. So you had this sort of flood of union cards coming into the UAW after the big three strike, not just from Mercedes workers, but from Hyundai workers, Honda workers, Nissan workers, right? Tesla workers. It's always my favorite to talk about. And those workers are looking at what was won in that national strike and saying, oh, like, this is what having a union could do for us.
So, I was reading your piece. This started in September, I guess in the fall of 2023. It feels like it had been happening for a long time, but that wasn't, this is a very nascent sort of, I know there's been attempts in the past at this Mercedes plant, but nothing as sort of like, I think
it had never gotten to an election.
Yeah.
It had never gotten to an election.
And so when the UAW gets this, are there other plants out there that might have signed a similar number of cards? Because I wonder how much like the German aspect plays into this, because and this came up last week around Thursday or Wednesday. The UAW announced that they were filing unfair labor practice or the equivalent with the German government.
Right.
Explain that dynamic and what you found if the UAW felt like there was a value to doing German plants first before they do other Japanese plants.
Well, the interesting thing, right, is that the Volkswagen plant in Chattanooga, the one that unionized just about a month ago, right, finally, that was their third union election at the Volkswagen plant. And that was with the
over the course of like a decade. I remember back in like the 2014 when you had the senators coming out there, the federal senators coming out against that.
Well, and that particularly because Volkswagen actually signed a neutrality agreement. So ostensibly, Volkswagen was not busting the union. So that got left to the governor and the senators and everybody else in, the state of Tennessee who wanted to make sure that the workers didn't have a union. And so when you look at that, right, that it took all of this time to get to a yes vote at the plant where the company is not opposed to having a union. Then you get Mercedes, and like several of the workers pointed out to me, right, that like the Mercedes plants in the US are the only plants that the company has worldwide that are not unionized. The German automakers are kind of seen as lower hanging fruit, but Mercedes was not Volkswagen in this one. The company definitely had anti-union consultants. They were definitely barraging the workers and holding captive audience meetings and all of the usual sort of array of, dirty tricks and, offers. And like, we should note, right, that one of those offers was they actually ended 2-tier pay structures and gave everybody a raise. So, the workers at Mercedes got something out of this union campaign, even without having won a union.
Right.
And so when you look at all of that, right, that yes, on the one hand, the German manufacturers, because Germany has sectoral bargaining and works councils and all of these things and is seen to be a more pro-union place, these seem to be easier maybe than the Japanese companies where everybody assumes kind of the gloves will be off.
And isn't there German statutes though that say that they have to be neutral in these things? And it seems that, based upon your reporting, it seems like they weren't neutral at all.
It doesn't quite say they have to be neutral, right? And I'm certainly not an expert in German labor law. But there are stricter laws on what they can do in Germany than there are certainly in the US where, again, they're allowed to do pretty much anything they want to you. So yes, they have filed complaints. I don't know what the results of those are going to be yet. The annoying thing about unfair labor practice charges, whether in this country or any other one, is that like courts are slow.
Right.
And so, you mostly don't want to get bogged down in a million court decisions because, if you see bringing up Tesla again, since I love to talk about Tesla, right? The Tesla workers have, had unfair labor practice charges upheld by the labor board, and Elon Musk appealed them to the Fifth Circuit, and the Fifth Circuit upheld them. And he's still not doing the very little thing that he was asked to do by the labor board, which is essentially to rehire the fired workers and to tell the workers that they have the right to join a union, because the labor board can't really do that.
In what army, essentially?
Exactly. Right. So Germany, in this case, might be able to do more than the US, but I'm going to guess that that's not going to be enough to make the company kind of go, oh, fine, we'll let them have a union. I think the workers are going to have to overcome the union busting campaign, which is unfortunately kind of true everywhere these days.
So I imagine there's essentially two different constituencies that are sort of putting their heads together right now, and maybe in similar ways and maybe somewhat together, but that would be workers at the plant thinking, okay, we're going to do this again. I mean, I've even seen interviews with some of the workers saying we got to wait 3 or 4 months or whatever we get outside the window of when we signed the cards last time, and we're going to do it again. Yeah. And I would imagine there are people back at the UAW, national headquarters going okay, we're going to do this again, but when we do, we're going to do it. We're going to do this. And, in the plant, the same thing. Would you have a sense of what that is? Do they have a sense right now of these are 2 things that we could have done differently or better that next time around we're going to do differently or better?
I mean, I think the thing that you always want to do is better inoculation, right? So saying to the workers, the company will bring in a new CEO who's going to make a bunch of promises, and here are the examples of the places that have done that before, and this is how it hasn't actually worked out. Things like that are really key. One of the challenges in this campaign was that they did a lot of the organizing on the shop floor. And they did that partly because the workers who were driving this campaign, again, this was really led by the workers on the ground and not by UAW headquarters. They really wanted to do it themselves. They really wanted to do that organizing on the shop floor. And that has ups and downs, right? It has pros in that the workers who were in the organizing committee were very out and proud about their union affiliation. They would wear their union shirts to work, union bracelets, union buttons, union hats. And they really weren't afraid to push back on the company when the company said, you can't talk about this on company time. But on the other hand, you still got your manager breathing down your neck. And one of the other challenges is that a lot of these workers commute from really far away because the plant's kind of along the highway in between Tuscaloosa and Birmingham. So you've got a lot of workers coming from one of those 2 cities, but you've also got people coming from as far away as Anniston, as far away as Meridian, Mississippi, right? You have people who have 2-hour commutes
one of the people you featured in your story had, I think, an hour and 20-minute commute.
Yeah, exactly. Sammy Ellis comes from Anniston. Where I actually just got news that an electric bus plant has just unionized. So unionization in Alabama is not dead.
Oh, that's great.
But so that makes it harder also in terms of thinking about doing things like house calls, right? Where people, come to your door and your coworkers or the union rep come to your door and talk to you about what your fears might be, what you might want, and do the kind of deep organizing conversations that you can't really do when you're on the assembly line and have to make sure that you don't screw up the car going by you. That kind of thing is tough. It's going to be hard to navigate in that kind of a situation where you're okay, well, who can go make a house call in Mississippi right now? But I think that might be something that they spend more time figuring out how to do next time. And, the thing that Rick Webster said to me right after the vote, he was now we got, 2,045 workers who are definitely for the union, even after this really hard union busting campaign. And then we'll see, we'll see if the new CEO keeps his promises to, he sent out a video to everybody right after the vote saying thank you for believing in me and giving me a chance. And I'm not going anywhere. You'll see me on the shop floor. And he's we'll see if they make those changes or if things go back to being, unpleasant and messy. Our shifts stay long and grueling. Our schedules still suck. And those workers who voted against say maybe we were wrong to vote against it.
I want to get into some of the details of because the reporting you did in terms of and a lot of the issues was about time, about just how much they're working, and it does seem just crazy amounts of hours, and the scheduling being difficult. But are there, I mean, just as a matter of course, like I would imagine, and I think within your reporting too, you spoke about how early on they were able to, the organizers, you know, these are workers in the plant, right, who were taking upon themselves to organize, had a lot more sort of like freedom. And then the sort of the management got savvy and started to cut down. Do they is it a I guess a first order or just sort of like a general policy, like, hey, if you got 10 people who are hardcore union folks, have at least 2 of them who don't wear any union shirts, who don't wear the bracelets, who don't go there, so that you can get people into those closed door meetings and find out exactly what they're doing to try.
Everybody's in the closed door meetings, so don't worry.
They bring in? They
were doing those every morning at shift change. You know,
so everybody's got to go in, because my sense was that they're taking in 5 or 10 people at a time.
Well, so you do meetings. You do both. So you have.
I got to imagine those. I mean, you tell me if I'm right, but I got to imagine those anti-union firms that come in. They've got a running tally of they know, like, these 1,000 people. There's no way we're going to move them, and we're going to need to keep them isolated from this group of 1,000 people who we think are on the fence.
Yeah, well, right. They do all sorts of things, right? They fire leaders. They fire people who have been outspoken. The thing about a good union busting operation is it kind of runs like a good organizing operation in reverse, right? Both sides are trying to identify who are the organic leaders in the plant, who are the workers that other people listen to, that other people go to with problems, and win those workers over, because that means a lot of people go with them. Because those are the people that you listen to. They're trying to figure out who the leaders are that they can fire if you're the union busters, right? You're trying to figure out who the people are that, you know, you can lean on in a certain way. You're trying to figure out who has that long commute and doesn't want to be bothered. You're trying to figure out who has 3 kids to feed, whose wife has cancer, who's, you know, like, both sides are sort of trying to figure out what people want and how to give it to them. And one side is just doing that with a hell of a lot more bullying involved. Right. You know, the union side is saying we're going to collectively organize to win these things together. And the other side is saying, if you vote against the union, if you appear in our nice anti-union video, then we'll give you a raise. We'll give you a preferred job, right? We'll get you off the line driving and put you on driving a forklift or something like that, right? Some of these jobs that are less grueling and exhausting that are supposed to go with people with seniority if you're in a unionized plant. So, you know, it's both sides are really looking for the same things. It's just one of them is doing it with a combination of sort of bribery and pain, and that's the anti-union side. And the pro-union side is saying, look, we can win this if we work together and we have each other's backs.
What were the major things that the union organizers were looking for in terms of reforms at the plant?
Yeah, time really is such a big one. And we're seeing this more and more often since COVID, where people really, I think, got a sense that we didn't want to spend our entire lives at work, you know, especially when lockdown hit and you kind of can't do anything that you enjoy with your life. The only thing you can do is go to work. So we're really hearing from a lot of people in auto plants, but also in like fast food restaurants, in all sorts of places, that they want more time off, right? The UAW, one of its big demands that wasn't one, but is still a focus for the union during the Big 3 strike was the 32-hour work week, right? So we're literally talking about shorter work weeks. The workers at Mercedes just want to not be on a 6-day, 10.5-hour shift schedule with sometimes mandatory forced overtime, right? They don't want to work, you know, the company went to just 2 shifts at the plant. So there's a day shift and a night shift. And so the night shift is really the night shift, you know? And so they want to change that. So instead of having like one night shift, you have sort of 3 shifts. So one is part of the night, one is part of the night, but you can get at least some semblance of like a normal night's sleep. Right. People want to have weekends off so they can hang out with their kids. You know, with the rotating schedule that they're on now, their days off are often in the middle of the week where maybe your partner has a job and has to go to work and your kids are in school and you're just like at home alone catching up on sleep because you're exhausted. So that's a really, really huge one. That question of preferred jobs, like I was saying, where you get people sort of put into those based on favoritism rather than seniority, that was a big thing. Just, being treated with respect, which is something that, again, you hear over and over and over again, and it shows up in so many different ways in different union campaigns for different groups of workers, what respect looks like. But it's an overarching thing that people want to feel like they have some say in the conditions of their labor. And they want to be treated like humans and not like robots. The thing that Rick Webster said to me is people apply for a job in these auto plants and they think you're going to be an assistant to a robot. And what they don't realize is you are the robot.
Right.
And people don't want to be robots.
In my experience, people do not want to be robots. So what's next? I mean, it sounds like the workers that I've seen interviewed at this Mercedes plant, they're just waiting when we get, I guess it's a year out, so probably sometime in September, late or early October, they're going to they're going to have people sign the cards again. But from a national perspective, or a sense from other large like car plants in the South, do we have a sense of where the next sort of like story is going to be about that's equivalent to what's happened in Tennessee or Mercedes?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few, right? There are a ton of non-union auto plants across the South. There are a ton of them just in Alabama. Alabama is now the third largest auto manufacturing state in the country. So there are several options that it can be. There are workers organizing at a lot of these plants. I don't have a sense of where the next election is going to be yet, but we shall see. And in the meantime, I think there are going to be lessons taken from this organizing campaign. There's going to be lessons for what finally worked at Chattanooga. The workers at Volkswagen are going to be bargaining their first contract hopefully soon, and we're going to see how that goes. And it's going to be a slog. But we, as Jane McAlevey famously says, right, there are no shortcuts to any of this, unfortunately, because, the planet's on fire. But there's going to be a lot of hard work ahead. I know I sound like a cliche, but I think that there's something really important about recognizing how hard this is and how much of this the workers did on their own. And saying like, okay, then what kind of support do you need next time? What kind of community organizing do you need to do next time? What kind of backup from the national union is helpful? What kind of it is unhelpful? And learning a little bit more about the details on the ground at all of these different plants and what the issues are, because I imagine some of them are the same and some of them are different.
Sarah Jaffe, fellow at Type Media Center, based in New Orleans. We will put a link to your piece on the UAW campaign at Mercedes in these times at majority.fm. Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right, folks. A couple more things before we head into the fun half of the program. This story about a guy named Charles Littlejohn, excuse me. Charles Littlejohn was a, you can read up about this at American Prospect. Reuven Avi Yona wrote about this yesterday. Charles Littlejohn, about 20 days ago, began serving a 5-year prison sentence for unauthorized disclosure of tax information. He was a contractor with the IRS. He stole documents associated with public official A, who was Donald Trump, and provided it to news organization One, which was the New York Times. And then Littlejohn also stole tax information for thousands of ultra-wealthy individuals uploaded it to a private website and provided it to news organization 2, which was ProPublica. And the tax returns included folks like Elon Musk's, Jeff Bezos's, and Mark Zuckerberg. The idea that the guy got 5 years is just absurd. Under sentencing guidelines, apparently, his maximum sentence was 10 months. But the district judge, Anna Reyes, sentenced him to 5 years on the grounds that others must be deterred from doing the same. Now, first off, highly unlikely that people are going to do this. I mean, if people, the idea that it was just one guy who did it after 4 years with Donald Trump or 3 years is pretty shocking. And you're going to get caught. The chances of you not getting caught are pretty low. But this is a public service. This is a public service. It is important for the public to understand that the ultra wealthy are getting away with murder in terms of their taxes. In fact, Little John's sentence, according to this piece in the Prospect, is exceedingly harsh relative to people who have actually evaded their taxes. I mean, the seriousness of a punishment should be a function of the seriousness of the crime. And the seriousness of the crime should be a function of what does it do to the public? Who is injured here? And what is the nature of the injury? And when someone doesn't pay their taxes or evades taxes or sets up shell companies to evade taxes or offshores money, they're hurting everybody in society. Everybody. When someone reveals what the ultra wealthy are not paying in their taxes because they figured out a legal way of doing that, they're helping the public. They're helping society because they're making us understand what is going on and why we may have some issues like wealth inequality, for instance. I think he's quoted in this piece, but Gabriel Zuckman was writing a piece in the New York Times entitled, It's Time to Tax the Billionaires. He's an economist at the Paris School of Economics and the University of California, Berkeley. And he wrote, until recently, it was hard to know just how good the super rich are at avoiding taxes. You can find this in the New York Times. Public statistics are oddly quiet about their contributions to government coffers, a topic of legitimate interest in democratic societies. Over the past few years, I and other scholars have published studies and books attempting to fix that problem. While we still have data for only a handful of countries, we found that the ultra wealthy consistently avoid paying their fair share of taxes. In the Netherlands, for instance, the average taxpayer in 2016 gave 45% of their earnings to the government, while billionaires just paid 17%. And the bottom line is that this professor, this scholar, would not be able to give us a sense of what's happening in the United States were it not for Charles Littlejohn. And what he found out is that in the 1960s, scroll down, we can see maybe that graph. the 400 richest Americans paid more than half of their income in taxes. Now, you know this because I have spent many times saying that the top marginal tax rate in the 50s and 60s in this country was 90%. In the US, the top marginal tax rate, no, don't show this yet because that's not what I'm talking about. The top marginal tax rate was 90%. So in other words, if you earned over $450,000 at that time, I think it was $470,000, which would be about $3 million. Every dollar after that $3 million would be taxed at a 90% rate. Prior to that, it went up in tiers. That's what progressive taxation means. That's what tax brackets are. Not all your money is at 90% if you go over 470. It's just the first dollar after 470,000 or 3 million in today's dollars would be taxed at 90%. Now, people take tax deductions. People hire accountants to find tax shelters. So the effective rate was closer to 50%, 55%. I don't know, maybe a little bit higher. But now the wealthiest Americans, the top billionaires, this is in 2018. They probably got even a break during once the Trump tax cuts kicked in, paid half of that, 23% of their income in taxes. Here it is. This is this one here. Put this one up. This chart right here shows you that in 1960, the effective tax rate for the 400 richest Americans was at 56.3%. Now, to be clear, the number of Americans who are probably like in that same sort of zone today, it's probably, a little bit bigger, but relative to the 330 million people, probably not. And the amount of money that they have on the other side of that $470,000 a year is much greater. In other words, they're hoarding all the money. Put that back up. I just want to go through it. And then you can see it dipped in 1964 to 52% effective tax rate. It popped back up in the 60s. And then in 1970, it was still at 52.7%. That's even after John F. Kennedy's tax cuts, dropping the marginal rate to 70%. You got rid of some of the loopholes. And then when we get into the Reagan era, we start taxing capital gains differently than we tax labor, essentially. In other words, if you make money from your money, you get taxed less on that than making money from actually working. And the way it's justified is supposedly, well, that money is making jobs for other people. But the reality is nobody's making jobs when someone makes more money because their stock portfolio has gone up. In fact, we're now at the point where stocks go up when people lose jobs. No one's getting hired because your mansion or your huge tract of land goes from $2 million in value to $25 million in value. No one's getting money because your Bitcoin went from, whatever it was to whatever it is. That's sort of like the hoodwink, if you will. And that's like when, Warren Buffett used to say his secretary paid more in taxes than he did. It's really screwed up. We need higher taxation. And the problem is not just in terms of like we need it for, our budget or our debt, because the actual reality is we don't. But this type of wealth disparity, it diminishes competition. It impoverishes more people. It causes our politics to be completely skewed. Completely skewed. Because billionaires had the ability to pick up the phone and talk to Eric Adams or to the president of Columbia University and say, I don't want those protests from those college kids. Send the police in, send this in, send whatever. And I got news for you. If you think that's the only thing that they do, you're nuts. They are creating policy. They are influencing policy. They have access to people because of the way that money operates in our politics. They also have the ability to say, you know what? I'm smart. I've made a lot of money. I'm going to do a little experiment with education in the United States, like the Gates Foundation. And I'm going to drop $1 billion into the system and see what happens. And then I'm going to follow it up with a couple other $1 billion through other means. And then 15 years later, you hire a company called the Rand Corporation to assess how does the Gates formula of education reform work? And they say, actually, it's really bad. And we lose generations of teachers because of it. And 2 generations, 3 generations of students go through school with these high stakes testing, and their education gets messed up. Or one of them says like, hey, I don't want there to be high-speed train between San Francisco and LA. I'm going to do everything in my billions of dollars of power to derail it. I'm going to pretend like I got something called the Hyperloop, which is nothing but a tunnel, so that the value of my car company is maintained. This is the problem with billionaires having this much money. This is why we should outlaw billionaires by simply confiscating their money through taxation. You want to keep 100 million? Maybe we can have 100 millionaires. We can move from there. We should have a wealth tax, and we should completely narrow the capital gains preference for taxation to investments that clearly have a value to society. A really explicit one, which probably is about 4 or 5% of what actually gets written off as capital gains.
And as you're saying, Sam, it's like it's its own form of governance in a way. Like the for example, the Adams example. Like those are not state actors in any way influencing, city policy towards people. And the same thing with that oil meeting where Trump basically pledged those guys, hey, if you give me $1 billion in funding, it's carte blanche. You write me a bill, I'll give it to you.
100%. This is a huge problem. This is the problem why, why antitrust is so important. It's the same, it is the exact same dynamic because these people are monopolizing the money. The amount of wealth concentrated in the hands of so few is an antitrust issue, frankly, because it decreases how much democratic power we all have and the accountability for elected officials because they can hide behind somebody with billions of dollars. That's just the reality. This country, in terms of economic prosperity, did the best during what is known as the Great Compression, that is in the 50s and 60s, where wealth inequality was a fraction of what it is today. A fraction of what it is today. So check that out. There's all sorts of issues with this, but the most blunt instrument to deal with this is to raise taxes on the ultra wealthy and include a wealth tax. And the idea that we couldn't do a wealth tax is a complete fiction. The idea that we can't tax unrealized gains is absurd. We do it every single day. Everyone who owns a house pays taxes on an unrealized gain. That's why property taxes go up. That's why they send an assessor out to assess your property. If we can do that with every single house in the country, with every single piece of property in the country, we can certainly do it with, I don't know, the top 400 wealthiest people in this country, or the top 1,000 wealthiest people in this country. Of course we can. Be very lucrative. You know where actually a billionaire tax is really going, is successful? It's a millionaire tax in Massachusetts. State officials said Monday that the voter-approved surtax on high earners has generated more than $1.8 billion in revenue this fiscal year, with still 3 months left to go. That means state officials could have hundreds of millions of surplus dollars to spend on transportation and education initiatives. If people feel more comfortable with the federal government just simply empowering the states, but most states are not going to do this. $800 million has come in that is beyond what the government had planned to spend in fiscal year 2024. Voters approved the measure in 2022 to levy an additional 4% tax on annual earnings over $1 million. And the Massachusetts Budget and Policy Center, a left-leaning think tank, projected it could generate $2 billion a year. State officials last year put their estimates slightly lower at $1.7 billion a year. So far, it's vastly exceeded those expectations, generating nearly $1.4 billion alone last quarter. I don't know. Maybe we're going to anticipate some type of huge capital flight from Massachusetts. Or maybe these people make their money in Massachusetts and they're like, I don't want to leave. But it doesn't matter if people are leaving because the revenue is still exceeding all expectations. People left during 2021 and 2022. And you know why? Because it's freezing cold in Massachusetts. And if you're locked in your house and you can't go outside and you can't eat in restaurants, then you leave. But state's population rebounded last year with a gain of nearly almost 12,000 residents from July to July. So there you go. It works. All right. We're going to take a break and head into the fun half. Then I'm going to talk about Social Security. Because it's the fun half, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, it's your support that makes the show possible. You can make sure that this show continues to survive and to thrive by becoming a sustaining member at jointhemajority.report.com. When you do, you not only get the free show free of commercials, you get the I Am the Show in the fun half, and honestly, you keep us independent. We, occasionally this comes up in the office, but we've never, ever had an investment from in this show. We've never had a corporate investment. We've never had a big funder. It's possible that billionaires have given us money, but if so, they've done so at $10 a month. And It's possible millionaires have given us money also at $10 a month. But I think the biggest single investment we've had in the show, which wasn't really an investment, it was a donation, was at one time, I think was $3,000. This was like maybe 6-7 years ago. And listener Janet, was very supportive of this program. And then at one point I was like, well, we're able to maintain. We don't need that type of money. You can donate it to, a place that needs it. But it's because of our members. So if you listen to the show on a regular basis, if you want to support what we do, join themajorityreport.com. Also, don't forget justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee and hot chocolate. They got the Majority Report blend. It's a great company. Justcoffee.coop. What happened on ESPN?
Oh, hey! I was fiddling with this on camera while
Why are you
while
backwards?
It's coming from there. It's sort of yeah. So I'm a little bit warped, but on ESPN we spoke about the upcoming conference finals, which is now the current conference finals for both the Eastern Conference and Western Conference, and exciting for game one between the Celtics and Pacers, more competitive than I anticipated on the Garden floor, but Celtics able to still turn it out. We will have more to talk about on Monday at 4 p.m. as we see more of the action, what happens both on the NHL side and the NBA side, which, Sam, Bruins unfortunately lost, but you still have one of your teams in, and so two out of 4 of the MR crew still have their teams in contention for the NBA finals, which is pretty exciting for all of us here. But youtube.com/ESPN show for more, to check out our old streams and some of our clips, and we'll be back at 4 p.m. On Monday. And then Left Reckoning, David and Matt last night spoke about the pardoning of Daniel Perry in Texas and kind of the implications of that for both the state and other actors in that regard. So youtube.com/Left Reckoning for that, and patreon.com/Left Reckoning to access the post game.
That Celtics game last night was a little tense. I was texting with my buddies and I was saying, like, if they're down with 5, if they're not up by with 5 minutes to go, they're going to lose. And they were down by 2 with like 4 minutes and 53 seconds.
They were able to capitalize on a little bit of the youthfulness of the Pacers, because the Pacers got to the point where they were like going to close it out, and then they just fell all over themselves. They couldn't keep the ball in their hands. They couldn't. They started freaking out that they were going to win the game, so they lost the game.
I think that's true, but they also played way above themselves, it seems to me, during the game. And the Celtics, nobody was hitting a 3.
Right, that was the big problem. Is once the shooting iced up a little bit, they were having trouble going to second, third, strategies, sort of. But then Brown made the big one, which was basically, and Tatum started getting cooking in overtime.
Yep, that was crazy.
So very excited.
646-257-3920 is the number. We will take your phone calls in just a moment, and we'll see you in the fun half. 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now. And I don't think it's going to be the same as it looks like in 6 months from now. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better 6 months from now than it is 3 months from now. But I think around 18 months out, we're going to look back and go like, wow. What is that going on? It's nuts. Wait a second. Hold on for a second.
The Majority Report.
Emma, welcome to the program.
Hey.
Matt.
What is up, everyone?
Nomi Key.
You did it. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
Bradley, you want to say hello?
Sorry to disappoint everyone. I'm just a random guy.
It's all the boys today.
Fundamentally false. No, I'm sorry. Women's...
Stop talking for a second and let me finish.
Where is this coming from, dude?
But dude, you want to smoke this 7A?
Yes.
Hi, me? Is it?
Yes.
Is this me?
Is it me?
It is you.
Is this me?
It's me.
I think it is you. Who is you? No sound. Every single freaking day. What's on your mind?
Sports.
We can discuss free markets and we can discuss capitalism.
I'm gonna go throw up.
Libertarians.
They're so stupid, though.
Common sense says, of course.
Gobbledygook.
We fucking nailed him!
So what's 79 plus 21?
Challenge met.
I'm positively quivering.
I believe 96, I want to say.
857-210-35.
35.
501. 1/2. 3/8.
9/11, for instance.
$3,400. $1,900.
654 $3 trillion sold. It's a zero-sum game.
Actually, you're making me think less of it.
But let me say this. Poop.
Call it satire. Sam goes, it's satire.
On top of it all,
Yeah.
my favorite part about you is just like every day, all day, like
Yeah.
everything you do.
Without a doubt. Hey, buddy, we see you. All right, folks.
It's just the weak being weeded out, obviously.
Yeah, sun's out, guns out. I don't know.
But you should know.
People just don't like to entertain ideas anymore.
I have a question. Who cares?
Our chat is enabled, folks.
I love it.
I do love that.
Look, gotta jump. Gotta be quick. I gotta jump.
I'm losing it, bro.
2 o'clock. We're already late, and the guy's being a dick. So screw him. Sent to a gulag?
Outrageous.
Like, what is wrong with you?
Love you, bye.
Love you. Bye-bye. We are back. It's the fun half, ladies and gentlemen. Emma Vigeland out today. There's a little bit less headroom. Like that Warner Brothers here.